Good evening and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. I am your host, Jason Miles, and once again, we are tardy. And I will take full responsibility. Having a lot of technical issues with camera lately. And I can't explain why in some of the software, so I apologize ahead of time. We're late. Try to fix these way ahead of time. I actually had everybody ready in the room, and then bam, started having crazy issues. And it's always going to happen right before you start. So apologies for us running a little late. That means we have to go over a little bit. So maybe you get an hour and 15 minutes. The main show. That being said, for all of you new to the show, could you please hit the like and subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell, as we are constantly adding new programming to the show. We're doing our second sports show on Monday. Last night we did a new thing we're trying out here at This is Revolution, which is a reaction show to the video essays that we do. And we did a reaction show last night with Bertram Cooper and Crüe Reed on the latest video essay, Bill Cosby Ain't Your Dad. And it was a good, fun conversation that we had. Professor Dylan Rodriguez jumped in the conversation, so it was a good time. And it's a conversation that I don't think is over. Definitely want to add to. And for all of you that are already subscribers and patrons, thank you for keeping this revolution machine chugging along. Now, we have a lot to cover on today's news roundup. As usual, it's not just simply the news of the day, but usually really a popular news story, and we give a lot more context. So let me bring in my co-hosts, TIR Crüe, if you will. You know him as the man of the Mau Mau Hour. He is my homie, my dog. He is the I looked over at the chat, and Steve, once again, is probably the funniest person. Between Steve and Gigi.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles.
Did you see what they said? That you will merge into the chair and be one, Pascal.
Everyone's got jokes from my chair, man. The chair is very comfy. The chair is very comfy.
Okay. And coming all the way live from a bunker somewhere, Great Northwest, is everyone's favorite middle manager, Death Star. He is the Deep State Kuba.
Hello, everyone. Since you were wondering, that picture was from a team building retreat that all of the Moth Track Deep State Death Star middle managers went on to, like one of the pleasure planets off of Coruscant. Totally cleaned up there. Incidentally, it was like I was Jedi mind tricking people. You know? That look worked for me.
Kuba, there's kind of some saved photos that Jean uses, and I think Jean actually uses screen captures from the show. And I actually was like, well, fuck it, I know Kuba. Let me go try to find some I'm sure he's got some nice pictures, and you don't. You have pictures, bowls of fucking cereal, and your kitchen from 18 years ago. You have the worst social media presence in the history of shitty social media presences.
I know. Impressive.
That worked for the deep state, man.
You can tell. I'm not even trying to be funny. There's literally pictures of like a medicine cabinet and shit like that. I'm like, there's not even anything interesting in here, or a funny caption like, ho ho ho, out of Percocets. Well, yeah.
I mean, you think that was a medicine cabinet, but the people who that picture was meant for, they know what it means.
if your whole life is codes like that, then that is like next level Zodiac killer shit.
Oh, the Zodiac killer. That guy, honestly, not that impressive. When I was talking to him, it was nothing but like ego, and it kind of felt like he was fronting, right? But let me tell you, find, torture, kill. That guy's a true gentleman. Just classic, classy, straight on. Always says the right thing. Always carries the right equipment.
You are so mean. Pascal does not know who BTK is because he is not a fan of true crime.
No, I stopped watching television in 1984.
Oh, well, excuse the shit out of me. Mr. Bill Cosby traumatized me.
I'm actually joking. I watched television into the millennium.
You watch television right now.
I watched exclusive suggestions from Jason.
Then I'm so sorry because all I do is ask you to watch shit that's going to trigger you.
That's true, but at least I'm prepared in advance. I can't watch a lot of these like sitcoms and shit, man. That stuff is just, they're not, a lot of them are not that good. Some of them I watch just to, pass the time. I don't know. I'm more of a streaming guy. I just stream.
But you only stream black television, right?
I'd stream black television just to keep my eye monitoring like how bad the social engineering is going on.
Like apparently he only streams anything Tyler Perry-esque.
I don't like the Tyler Perry. I've watched some Tyler Perry movies. It's a little too much.
So if there's like a bad dark-skinned dude and a light-skinned gardener that will save the day, Pascal will watch it.
Tyler Perry, man, he makes a lot of money, man.
He was in Don't Look Up.
He did a good job.
He did great. Don't Look Up.
No,
someone stopped me at a mall once in, I can't remember what state I was in. It wasn't California. And they said, you look like Tyler Perry. And I was like, it was really hard for me to not say fuck you.
You do not look like Tyler. Was this a white person?
It was a black chick.
Wow.
Was she hitting on you? It might have just been like a really odd pickup line. Yeah.
That's like, you look like a young Nipsey Russell. Like, that's a shitty fucking pickup line.
People tell me I missed the light-skinned bandits yesterday.
Hey,
wow.
you should have seen me, Pascal. I was so nervous because Teray hadn't talked to me all day. And you know how Teray is the most prepared fucking motherfucker in the history of prepared light-skinned niggas. He fucking didn't hit me up at all until the last damn minute. And I was like, this motherfucker is not, he's going to light skin flake on me.
Shit about Torre, when he's on these shows, he wears like a shirt from every college his father ever taught at.
Wait. You got to clue me in on these like light skin, dark skin stereotypes. Like light skin people flake on you.
Like, light skin people are the worst. Light skinned people created the myth that black people are always late.
I'm really trying to be objective here. Because I'm kind of mocha, kind of paperback brown, as is Jason, but Jason has a little bit more of that light skin kind of hate than I do. But there are stereotypes. I do not appreciate them. One of them is about the level of masculinity of men according to their complexion. Light-skinned men are believed to be a little bit more soft, not as quote-unquote rugged, not as hard. Dark-skinned men are considered to be more tough, that are at fighting. I find all of these to be bogus because actually I find a lot of light-skinned guys who get picked on.
Do you think Howard Hewitt could beat up Aaron Hall?
I think, Aaron Hall, I don't think can fight. I think Aaron Hall was a nerd. See, that's the thing. Aaron Hall don't look like a tough guy. He looked like he was a nerd.
Aaron Hall has some fucked up teeth, and when your mouth is that raggedy, you better know how to fight because I'm gonna talk shit about them teeth.
I think Aaron. Look, see, this is the thing though. I don't believe in the undermining of the light skin, but I've seen some light skinned dudes who can whip ass because they oftentimes get picked on a lot particularly if they live in the hood, because there's always some crispy Negro who'll be like, "You out, yellow motherfucker? You think you better than us?" Blah blah blah. and trying to test him, and he getting his ass beat, and then all of a sudden he gets good at fighting, and he's whooping Negroes behind. I've seen that phenomenon.
So you are saying that Howard Hewitt can whoop Aaron Hall?
I think Howard Hewitt could take on Aaron Hall.
I see it. And since you're Americans, you think a familiarity with and a penchant for violence is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense.
You know, our New Edition was badass, Pascal. No light skin dude.
No light skin dude. You know that New Edition is literally the music group of my age. They all are my age. Like they started singing my freshman year in high school. That's exactly my age cohort. Bobby Brown is a little bit older, but those cats are like, that's exactly my age cohort.
Yeah, yeah. No light skin dudes. They wasn't having it. They was like, look, man, we New Edition. We gotta be hard as fuck. Roxbury. What is it?
They had longevity as a Boston ripped off R&B group.
No light skin dudes. Shirley says, do you think Huey Newton overcompensated because he was light skinned? You mean when he got out of prison, he was buff as shit?
Huey Newton looked like he was beating some folks' ass.
Yeah, he might be the light skin exception. So give us a list on Twitter. Who is the light skin exception to the rule?
Light skinned dudes who can really kick ass?
Yes. So Huey Newton is on the list.
Huey
According
Newton
to Pascal, Howard Newton. Howard Hewitt is on the list.
I think Howard Hewitt can kick a little bit.
And Lionel Richie.
Clearly,
Lionel Richie can't fight. Nah. Lionel Richie can't fight. Nah. Lionel Richie ain't beating nobody up. He ain't beating nobody up. Who's another light-skinned dude who look like? I'm not gonna lie, right? This is gonna blow your mind. I believe that Prince could kick somebody's ass.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah, I mean,
get you off guard.
The
short, light-skinned dude probably was getting people picking on him. I could see him probably kicking some people's ass.
Well, the biggest barrier to violence is actually psychological, and if someone is like has it mentally that no, I'm gonna fuck this person up and I'm not stopping until they're fucked up, then if you start, you surprise somebody who's a lot bigger than you, and as long as you just keep being ruthless, it's like throat, balls, throat, balls, eyes, right? Like you don't fuck around. And
someone said the guy who was like, she's talking about Shirley, talking about Jim Kelly. Jim Kelly is an example of a light-skinned dude who kicks some ass.
Wait, did he say throat, ball?
It sounded like a video game description.
Throat, ball.
Then eyes.
It sounded like a video game description. Now, let me ask you a question. Now, this depends on your aesthetics. Muhammad Ali. Some would say Muhammad Ali was light-skinned. Yeah, people will make that argument.
He was light-skinned. He was beating the shit out of
I want one of those Negroes who confuses paperback brown for light skin.
You know what? We have to get to the show. I'm sorry, but I can't get Kuba saying throw balls. Between that and the motherfucker saying I look like Zordon. Okay. But on a serious note, Kuba, there is much talked about caravan of truckers in your native Canada, and they are causing a bit of a media stir.
Yes, it's what we in Canada call a misunderstanding.
Let me bring up a quote.
But the line between misunderstanding and state of emergency in Canada is very fluid.
Well, let's bring up the quote here. Oh, God. Oh, wrong quote.
We got to roll today, guys. I'm telling you right now, boy. This is like I got the show. It's gonna be crisp. Everything's going great. Everything's prepared.
When he said throw balls.
You don't know how prepared Jason likes to be for these Thursday show. We come up in here today and everything's all fucked up. It's like,
Everything's all fucked up. It's the throw balls and the Zordon comment. I can't stop laughing. Okay, seriously. The protesters want a meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to demand an end to all vaccine mandates and say they won't leave until he acquiesces. Opposition leader Candice Bergen wants Trudeau to step up to solve the crisis just a week after meeting with protesters and telling them, don't stop, it's working. That is from an article in Politico yesterday from author Justin Ling. Kuba, would you like to expand on this?
Yes. So just to give some context, the in order to prevent spread of COVID, a number of measures were introduced specifically for essential cross-border traffic, which largely means moving freight, truckers. First, there was a quarantine period in place. Then when the vaccines became available, many truckers got vaccinated, and the Trudeau government introduced a measure that would require truckers that are going across the border from the United States into Canada to have proof of vaccination in order to be able to clear the border. 90% of truckers are vaccinated. So there's been a very high level of compliance. In addition, the general population is vaccinated at over 80%. So there's a high level of vaccine uptake in Canada overall. However, this vaccine mandate was seen by a lot of anti-vax groups, conservative groups, people fed up with the COVID restrictions in general, as a lightning rod and a basis for a nationwide organized protest. It began in Western Canada, and a convoy of truckers rolled from British Columbia to Ottawa, where they converged at the end of January. And since then, they've been occupying the central part of Ottawa. The numbers are between 800 and 2,000. People come and go. And people arrived in their rigs. So there's large vehicles blocking parts of the center of the city. In addition to that, there's been an organized protest that's been going on for weeks, affiliated, with the trucker convoy at the border crossing between Alberta and the United States, which has blocked off the flow of traffic between Canada and the US at that facility, which is a significant amount of traffic that's been stopped. It's affecting businesses, it's affecting regular people. There are smaller protests in solidarity that have sprung up in Vancouver and Montreal. There was a bridge closure on the Ambassador Bridge between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario, which is one of the busiest crossings into Canada from the United States. That impacted thousands of people moving back and forth. Significant amount of economic activity was disrupted. The people involved, the protesters themselves, have a range of different views and a range of different demands that have been made. One has to do with ending the particular mandate that affects truckers, but from there's been a significant escalation. So other demands that have been made: put an end to all COVID restrictions nationwide, put an end to all vaccination mandates, stop vaccinating people. Many of the protesters have called for the Trudeau government to step down, or for Trudeau himself and other key government figures to be arrested and to face some uncertain charges related to what's many of the trucker protesters consider to be violations of basic Canadian laws and freedoms. The slogan that the protesters use is actually just freedom. That's the beginning and that's the end. It's vague, it sounds positive, but at the same time, it conceals what's actually a much more ambitious agenda. Um, and at the edges, there's a significant amount of QAnon supporters and a place where the anti-vax mandate demands bleed into the kind of deep state QAnon thinking that we saw in the United States through the Trump period. One of the most colorful figures at the protests in Ottawa is a woman named Romana DeLudo, who is a leader within the QAnon, the Canadian branch of QAnon movement, who pushes forward theory that all of the established Canadian leadership and all existing Canadian institutions are illegitimate and attached to a despicable deep state program, that Canada, as it is currently construed, is a illegitimate corporation, with its constitution being just a corporate charter, and the true queen is not the one in Windsor, in Buckingham Palace in London, but Ramona herself. She announced that she is the queen, the legitimate queen of Canada. Her followers burn the Canadian maple leaf, which they claim is a symbol of the illegitimate corporation of Canada, and they have a purple flag of their own, which is her royal flag. She's announced that all COVID regulations are suspended and has instructed her followers to arrest the illegitimate Trudeau government and any other leaders they can get their hands on. The protests have gone on for weeks and they've paralyzed Ottawa. For days, the trucker protesters would honk their horns continually as part of their protests, including well into the early hours of the morning. It got bad enough, so a judge issued an injunction against further use of car horns as part of the protest. And police are instructed to enforce that injunction, but it's a very delicate matter. There are enough protesters in Ottawa so that they outnumber police, and with the resources available for the Ottawa Police Commission, there's an anxiety that if the Ottawa Police Service rather, if they were to try to systematically end the protest by force, send everybody home, arrest those who resist, that they might be overwhelmed, that it might lead to a spiral of violence. Similarly, there's an anxiety about the children of the protesters, because the protesters, a lot of them, there's a lot of good reasons to be angry. There are a lot of legitimate grievances attached to COVID restrictions and a lot of basic human unhappiness and with the conditions that we live in, an awareness that existing leaders, the establishment in general, hasn't really been addressing the problems that regular people face. With QAnon, Wexit, Western Ontario, Western Canadian, sorry, a separatist movement based in Alberta, and other extremist or fringe political groups giving narratives, presenting narratives online that help articulate, help turn that sense of grievance, that misery that people face, that fear and frustration when they look at the future, into a political program. And many people thought that they would just kind of like January 6th at the Capitol, that they would march into Ottawa and everything would fall into place because that had been the implicit promise of the organizers. And so they brought their kids, and it was a party atmosphere. About 25% of the vehicles associated with the convoy in Ottawa have children in them. So if you do begin mass arrests or use pepper spray, rubber bullets, tear gas to try to disperse the protesters, you're putting children in harm's way. This also complicates the any strategy to put an end to this deadlock by force. So that's the situation we're in, where we're at. The protests are continuing. Border crossings, important border crossings, are getting blocked. The one in Alberta, more or less continually. Other sort of flash protests come and go in other parts of Canada. And Ontario has, Ottawa, the capital city of Ottawa, has basically been shut down by the presence of these protesters who are insisting that they're not going anywhere until their demands are met.
I have quite a few comments, questions, and inquiries. One is that I have, I don't know if I've ever told you this, Cooper, but I have a decent amount of family in Canada.
Yes,
As you
did.
probably know, particularly in Quebec, there is a very large Haitian population. But
Indeed.
I also have some friends who live in Ottawa. One particularly who works in media there. And
Ottawa is a mixed city. It's both Anglo and Franco. It's not like cities further west. So sizable Haitian population there as well.
right, because she has some. As a matter of fact, the Haitian guest we had on with you when we were talking about Africa Haiti, he lives in Ottawa. As a matter
I
of fact.
remember.
She basically is telling me that there is a sense of a city under siege in Ottawa, and she's very disturbed. And my position is that I think we all recognize that people have a right to base. I mean, I don't know the Canadian Constitution, but I'm sure freedom of speech or freedom of protest or freedom to demonstrate is something that exists within the confines of that constitution or that legal structure. So I
Right.
don't discourage people protesting even if they feel they have a problem with COVID restrictions. However, the question I have is this movement to challenge the COVID restrictions really just a cover for an ideological seepage of reactionary right wing politics spilling over into Canada that's really becoming a global phenomenon, even kind of related to the United States? Because I remember when Trump rose into the American political milieu, and I had a lot of my Canadian friends and family were like, "Oh, you Americans, how could you guys let something like this happen? This is ridiculous. We're just going to close our borders. This is, oh my God, this is just barbarous." And I remember telling them that, like, you guys will have your Trump. Don't hold your breath. You guys will have your Trump. And my larger question is that, do these various iterations of political activity demonstrate the pivot in Canadian politics that may lead to the reactionary right turn?
So I think that what we've seen since the beginning of since Trump's election and then accelerated with COVID and COVID restrictions has been the international metastasis, the kind of viral spread of a particular narrative that is grounded in a few different sources. One is QAnon, one is the sort of new age wellness movement, one is what what we would think of as conventional far right politics, ethno state, nationalism, anti globalism, sometimes meaning anti Semitism, sometimes meaning anti multilateralism. And it has used the avenues available by online mobilization to take people who would otherwise be in minorities of one within their communities, those ideas really wouldn't be entertained by their friends and family, and given them a community, a transnational community, to mobilize and validate around that particular form of opposition to the establishment and the status quo. And it's not just Canada. When people have been asking me about the situation in Ottawa, I remind them that during a German anti-COVID restriction protest, protesters nearly swarmed the Reichstag, nearly broke into German parliament. And, that's not easy. And these were German protesters. Similarly, Ramona DeLudo, the QAnon Queen of Canada, she's Filipino Canadian. And when you look at the protesters, both in Canada and the US, the sort of January 6th Trump protesters in Europe, do you have a thing for power?
No.
So, I think that there's more inclusivity when you have this sort of anti-vax, anti-COVID restriction umbrella. It gives them something to say which isn't overtly racist, and as a result, you have participation by minorities, Turks, Muslims, North Africans in Europe, racial minorities in the United States. In Ottawa, there are some Indigenous people at the protests as well. And you can also find Nazis everywhere, don't get me wrong. But this unstable coalition, given life by the particular combination of generalized misery and the confluence of these different ideological streams, it's kind of like a something for everyone buffet if you're pissed off enough and you don't want to go left. It's a risk everywhere. I think that in Canada, we'll see what happens with the response, but support for the truck protesters is not majoritarian. It's not even that large scale. These tactics are also very alienating to a lot of Canadians that may dislike Justin Trudeau, may have grievances of their own, may be experiencing the same misery and dislocation and fear as the protesters, but like American liberals, feel that the transgression of morals and norms is just too much. It's off-putting. It's vulgar. It's gross. And I think that different societies will respond differently, but in Canada's case, I wouldn't be surprised if Trudeau actually gets a bump once this is settled by force, because it will give him a chance to look like a tough guy, while at the same time giving him a narrative where he was compelled to do this. He's a tough guy, but he's still polite.
So you don't think this is bad for Trudeau at all?
I think it depends on. It's an extraordinarily risky situation once you start breaking up the protests. I think that the Ontario Police Service that's been looking at the issue of children at the protesters' children, that they are absolutely correct. If the narrative is we busted some chuckleheads and sent everybody home, and some of them are going to cool off in jail, then that's great for Trudeau. If a child is hurt by police, or if a child's parent is hurt by police that are trying to take the child away, that's a problem, because then sympathy will immediately go to the side of the protesters. And Canadian police, this is not the first time they've broken up large-scale, long-standing protest movement. They have a lot of experience, usually against indigenous groups and environmentalists that are protesting pipelines or clear cuts or other types of environmental devastation. And the playbook is usually you let them vent for a period of weeks. You wait for them to get tired. Some of them go home. You keep telling them to go home. All the while, you're collecting intelligence. You're sending drones to scout the area. You're looking for informants. You're following people on social media. You're identifying the individuals that you think are the most important. You're observing the layout of the territory that you're going to have to raid. And then one day you hit. It occurs and it's over within a matter of hours. I expect that that's the pattern that we'll see here. What may be interesting is that some elements of the left, when they see the tactics that the RCMP, other parts of the Canadian security apparatus have used against them in environmental protests, use against the trucker protesters in Ottawa, you may actually, there might be some cross-pollination there that emerges, some sympathy. That's a concern that I have as well. But I think that it's much more likely to have an outcome like that than some kind of negotiation. Trudeau is not going to meet with the protesters. The only party leader that did meet, and you quoted her, Candice Bergen, she's not the leader of the Conservatives yet. They have an interim leader, but she's one of the leadership candidates. That she's trying to galvanize the base, kind of do a DeSantis thing in Canada. Everyone else is not touching them. No interest from the NDP, from the Bloc Québécois, no sympathy. Everyone else says, go home, end this thing, it's crazy. So I doubt that they're going to be able to make an impact through existing political channels, and eventually it'll get broken up and they'll be sent home.
I just wanted to ask two questions on this. So they don't have any support from official right-wing political parties? Is that what you're saying, Kuba?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Do they have support from any official right-wing or conservative political parties?
So in Canada, there's a very small party called the Canadian People's Party, and which are basically fascists. And I think that they're fans of one another, the protesters and the CPP. And then the Conservative Party of Canada, the traditional right-wing party, the previous leader was not sympathetic with the truckers. And that may be why he's the previous leader. He lost an election badly. And then I think many of the party members thought he was on the wrong side of this protest movement. And to be clear, I think that the protesters they're responding to real dissatisfaction, fear, real grievances in their own lives. But the narratives that they're pushing, that through which those grievances are interpreted, some of it is QAnon, some of it is Wexit, some of it is a sort of more principled libertarian, anti-vax, anti-big government. Some of it is even going to be adjacent to the left in the sense that, vaccine mandates, big pharma is bad, government coercion is bad. Let's look after the people. But I think that the protest as a whole, the particular leadership that has emerged has this far right cast to it, while also attracting a fair amount of grifters and opportunists.
I just want to say this is further evidence of why I believe Besnet's formula that mass politics is over may be the case for the left, but it ain't for the right.
Not at all.
Mass politics is working for them.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. They definitely know how to use it.
And
Well, Pascal,
there's a $10 million GoFundMe that got held up. And now that money's being rerouted through a Christian crowdfunding platform. So there's also money coming in from the outside, as well as a interest from the ideologically sympathetic and anti-vaxxers worldwide and what's going on in Ottawa.
well, Pascal.
Yes, y'all.
Switching topics, since time is of the
A
essence.
different type of grievance.
Thank you, Deep State Kuba, for that very polarizing take on the trucker convoy, as the chat went crazy with their takes on the trucker convoy. Inflation has reached a 40-year high, meaning it's a bipartisan issue, which means the news coverage will be sparse as the good guy, bad guy narrative doesn't apply. What ramifications are we going to have with 40 years of inflation? I have a quote here. Bam. Didn't fuck that one up. The Consumer Price Index, released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics Thursday morning, registered a 7.5% annual gain in January. Consensus economists were looking for a 7.3 rise. According to Bloomberg data, this represented the first rise since 1982, as well as an acceleration from the 7% year-over-year increases seen in December. Pascal, what does this mean?
Not only is this, it's actually the fastest rise that they've seen in the year. Basically, with the point of that article is something that I'm sure that most of our followers, who a lot of whom I know are working class folk, realize that things are getting expensive. Gas prices are coming close to $4 a gallon. Groceries are getting expensive. We're going through a period of significant inflation in this country that, according to CPI Consumer Price Index, which is a flawed measurement because Consumer Price Index doesn't take in certain consideration of major mass items, but nonetheless, the Consumer Price Index is telling us that we're in a 40-year high for inflation. Now, one of the things that I think is problematic for the way this discourse is happening for people who share our politics is that I've been noticing on various other podcasts, I will not mention names, there's been an attempt to almost be a kind of denial that there is inflation happening, that this is poo-poo, this is not happening, because there was a belief that if the left or leftists, if you will, because we have no left, acknowledge that there is a problem with inflation, that the inflation will be tied to the subsidies that came out of the COVID measures that were implemented by the Biden administration. And because we on the left are interested in state expenditure to finance quality of life policy, I think there was an ideological position that was taken by some on the left that conceding that there is some level of inflation in the United States would be a position of weakness being conveyed for those on the right who are always critics of political positions by liberals or the left that are rooted in subsidizing quality of life measures for Americans, particularly with direct cash payments, under the argument that, see, this is what happens when we let those liberals or those leftists get under control. They start inflation, or we have problems with the budget deficit, blah, blah, blah. It has been a consistent trope of the reactionary right when in the face of their insane, incredible budgets for the Pentagon spending, their insane cutting of federal income tax, cutting of corporate tax, they're always trying to make it seem like the left or the liberals are the fiscally irresponsible when their actual fiscal policies over the years are the ones that are bankrupting our government and forcing these situations where we have to find creative ways to find revenue. So in the face of that, I quite not surprisingly, but not really, I was not too happy about it, found that many who fancy themselves to be live podcasters had a posture of, oh, poo-poo, inflation is not a big deal. Oh, no. This is a conspiracy theory, blah, blah, blah. I think that was the wrong posture to take. And I think that for those of us who consider themselves to be on the left or to be left of center, we have to get very serious about rooting our arguments effectively in political economy, using not only traditional economic analysis but also left economic analysis, but doing so in a way understanding that in the period of capitalist realism, we have to be able to effectively deconstruct the normative economic analysis presented by our opponents with sound argumentation instead of being little children and being in denial, like, oh, no, this is not happening. That's ridiculous. And I think that part of the problem we have is that we're not effective. We don't have enough of our cadre on the left rooted in really understanding politics and economics and making our argument strong enough. So sometimes we come along with these what seem like airy fairy theories, MMT, that mainstream corporate and capitalist forces look at us kind of like a joke. The larger point I'm trying to say is that inflation is real, and I don't think that the left or leftists should run away with it. I think that there are actually ways that we can talk about this phenomenon that clearly are not rooted in any kind of policy subsidies that came out of the Biden administration for COVID. This particular situation of inflation is not at all rooted in the COVID measure subsidies that were put out by the Biden administration. Much more of the actual inflationary situation and prices are correlated to, number one, we know we have stream of service blockages or shipping problems because of COVID. A lot of people are not going to work. A lot of people are not going to train yards. A lot of people are not going to the shipping yards where merchandise is being transported. And as a result, costs are increasing to get merchandise shipped throughout the country, and those costs are being translated to actual consumers. Number two, we've had the Great Resignation. We've had people leaving their jobs. What has happened is that because labor is less consistent, the cost of keeping labor has actually gone up. What would be actually shocking to certain people is that low-wage workers are the only sector of the actual employment sector whose increase in wages have exceeded past inflation. Why? Because so many people are resigning in order to keep workers going. Employers are literally having to offer better paying jobs because there's a worker shortage.
But is this a temporary jump, though, for them?
I think that's a very sound question, and I don't think it's a long term. I think these are phenomenon. I think part of the problem with this whole situation and this whole paradigm is that everything about our current economic model is very much in flux because of COVID, and that there's no actually sound economic forecasting that can determine how exactly we can plan and plot our way out of this. And part of that reality is going to force us to be in a situation where the central banks, particularly the American Federal Reserve, is going to possibly or likely raise interest rates to counteract this inflation. The psychology of raising interest rates is that if it costs a lot of money to borrow money, i.e., interest rates are high, it will diminish the circulation of money into the economy. There's less money around, and as a result, prices will have to go down because people will not have extra money they can spend to buy stuff. So, in other words, if you're only paying a 1% interest on $100,000 loan, a lot more people are going to take $100,000 loans, and people who are selling houses like, damn, there's a lot of people out here with $100,000. We should start selling houses for $175,000 instead of $100,000. Well, if the interest rate is now 3%, less people are going to want to take out those $100,000 loans, and the people selling the houses saying less people have that $100,000, we might have to actually cut down the prices to like $90,000. So the psychology of basically increasing interest rates is a tactic to try to get prices to decrease to bring down inflation. The second thing the Federal Reserve might likely do is cut back on the quantitative easing. As we talked about in our show on MMT with Vaughn, quantitative easing is a way in which the Federal Reserve buys bonds or assets to cause liquidity of money and flush money into the system that allows financial services industries and particularly large institutions like banks to trade interest with each other. In other, borrow at 2% and lend at 4%. It's called a parity trade. So it also floods money into top level capital and causes a large amount of inflation in prices. So the Fed is going to be taking those steps within the year. The question becomes what happens when we have a quote unquote economic recovery since 2008 that's completely been based on the Federal Reserve indulging in quantitative easing and bottom barrel interest rates down to almost zero. If the Federal Reserve reverses that, less money is flown into the capitalist economy, less money is flown into finance capital, less money is open to be borrowing to people to buy. Is it going to cause a recession? And what is a recession? A recession is basically 2 consecutive quarters of negative quarterly growth. When you have 2 consecutive quarters of negative quarterly growth, that's when you have a recession. And the question that we're in right now is that we're in such a moment of flux with this economy is that people don't know if these anti-inflationary measures that the Fed is going to take is going to put us into a recession in an election year when Biden is being challenged in the midterms.
I would actually say that the uncertainty is even greater than that. Will these anti-inflationary measures put us in a recession? Also, will these anti-inflationary measures even work to stop price rises?
Say it again for the people in the back.
Yeah, the Pascal is absolutely right when he's describing the political economic condition that we're in right now. After 2008, the model that had delivered growth through the 90s and through the 2000s, it came to a screeching halt. It broke down structurally. Since then, the economy of the United States has been kept afloat largely through measures like quantitative easing, bank bailouts, other methods of pushing money into the economy from the top down. And that is not a sound basis for an economic revival. You're essentially ceding economic planning and the decision on how the wealth and material resources of the country are going to be used to these peak financial players. A lot of it goes into asset price inflation. We wouldn't be seeing these kind of Bitcoin NFT bubbles if money was harder to get a hold of, if it was dearer. But with a shortage of opportunities to invest in things that are sensible, people holding a lot of cash are looking for the next speculative investment. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it's Bored Apes. Doesn't matter if it's crypto. Doesn't matter if it's large-scale real estate speculation. Again, as long as you think you can cash out, find some sucker that'll pay 10 times as much as you did, and then just count your money on your way home. The United States claims that it does not plan its economy, that this is a free market, that we just let markets and firms and companies and households decide what to do. This is a very important and significant libertarian fiction that a lot of leaders and economists internalize. There's no such thing as an unplanned economy. The question is simply who does the planning. In many capitalist economies, places like Japan, many European countries, continental rather than the UK, planning is conducted at least in part, by the state, where certain technologies, certain industries, certain infrastructure are identified as being the engines of growth. We need fast trains. We need cheap power. We need something else. And so there is a real basis for the investments that are made by companies. If you are sitting on a ton of cash in Japan or in France, you look at what guidance is coming out of government ministries, and you know where you can invest to get a decent return. In the US, and other hyper financialized economies, the UK as well, being another one, you just need to find the next speculative bubble, get in early, cash out before it crashes. And that can keep money circulating, which means that even regular people have enough to get by, but it doesn't create any material progress. It doesn't build infrastructure. It doesn't repair bridges. It doesn't leave you a rail network. It doesn't improve transportation. Instead, the money just circles from one digital wallet to another. And under those conditions, this sort of boom or expansion that we've had since 2008, both pre-COVID and post, and thanks to the relief money, in a lot of ways has left very little of a mark as of actual material progress, of actual tangible investments that make the economy more efficient or make people's lives better.
Well, damn. Thank you, guys. If you'd want to talk more about this issue, we will be going into the champagne room in just a few minutes, where my daughter told me she'll be helping us with the phones tonight. So you guys will be able to call in, voice your opinion, have your take. It's usually a good time in the champagne room, as it has been the last few champagne sessions we have. Would you agree, fellas?
Oh, yeah.
We had some spicy champagne.
We had some rapping. We had black movie selections for Kuba. The insanity of the champagne room is just too much. I've been very tempted to clip the champagne room, but I can't do it. I feel like this is our private time. We can't clip that and put that out to the public. No.
You can't violate the sanctity of the champagne room.
Thank you.
Here or in any respectable strip club from coast to coast.
Exactly. The champagne room where there are no camera phones. So the champagne room is coming up. Before we go, I do have some parting words. I called into the majority report today. Did you happen to listen, Kuba? Were you busy deep stating?
I can't answer that question.
I was doing some work on the audio only podcast this morning. I had the majority report on the background, and I heard an interview with the journalist and author Travis Lupick, who was discussing his latest book about addiction, the opioid crisis, and the war on drugs. I'm not going to lie and say I read his book. I have not. And regardless of my disagreements with Lupick on some of his solutions to the unhoused, I'm very intrigued about his book. I look forward to getting a copy and checking it out. I'm sure there's a deep analysis inside, much deeper than he could get through in a short 30 to 40-minute interview. That being said, I think there was an oversimplification of permanent supportive housing and housing as a panacea for solving the homelessness problem. It is complex in nature, and many liberals that are on the left can only see solutions based within a capitalist paradigm. Affordable housing is more often than not a public-private partnership, and it's not permanent. Almost 500,000 public housing covenants will expire in the next 8 years. That puts many people on the verge of becoming victims of market pricing. Many unhoused citizens that qualify for housing know that the place they live has a shelf life. It's a precarious situation that those of us that don't have to navigate in that world will never understand. There are financial incentives to get people into housing. How they fare after that, not really in the purview of the overworked housing navigator, as many deal with a caseload that is unimaginable. Also, how does that affect the unhoused person that is just looking for a roof, but has to go through a series of bureaucratic hoops for the hopes of a home that they can stay in only for a limited amount of time? It also doesn't take into account that people that don't want to go into housing for whatever reason, but because they check all the boxes, become a priority over those that actually want it, but can't because of the means testing involved. And this is where we usually see the sweeping housing for all sloganeering. It's simple, it makes sense, and who doesn't agree? I'm, of course, a proponent of housing for all. I also understand that housing is still a small part of a complex problem. Chronic homelessness is going to bring with it issues that can't be resolved with a slogan or a hashtag. We need a detailed understanding of what we're dealing with, and we need to be aware of the fact that we want housing for people no matter what, no matter who. You're dealing with a segment of society that is idealized on both the right and the left. Wife beaters, sex offenders, parents that pimp out their physically challenged children, you name it. These are many of the people that make up the unhoused population, and they are not outliers or extreme cases. Many services are needed, and those services are also more often than not privatized, run by nonprofits as well. While these organizations may have their hearts in the right place, funding these programs is a constant challenge. Housing without wraparound services like mental health, counseling, therapy, medical care, job placement, childcare, transportation is just putting poor people in a violent box with clean needles and warehousing a larger public health issue. Perfect fodder for the right to use against public good policies, because without being properly funded and with a solid structure, these things become doomed to fail. I don't have the answer for the solution, but I believe we can have a more nuanced, robust discussion and get some good answers. And I want to send a huge shout out to all of the people that I've worked with and that work in unhoused facilities around the country. We appreciate you. And on that note, do you guys have anything to say on the way out?
To the champagne room.
Coob?
Oh, I have something to say. Next week on This Is Revolution podcast, in conjunction with our affiliation with the Real News Network, we will be interviewing Giannis Varoufakis.
Oh, and I totally forgot to say this in the beginning, and I haven't sent you the email, Pascal, but we will be on Left Reckoning after we interview Giannis Varoufakis.
Word. Yeah.
Left Reckoning, Wednesday the 16th.
Righteous.
Big week for you, gentlemen.
I have another someone's coming here to interview me on the 16th as well. So after we interview Giannis, someone's coming here, and then we go on Left Reckoning.
Excellent. Now to the champagne room.
Oh shit, Kuba can't wait. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't done it, please hit the like and subscribe, hit the bell. If you have any opinion about what I just said or what anybody said today, definitely drop a comment. Send us a message on Twitter. We definitely read them and listen. Thank you guys very much, and we are out.